Mark Wilson had planned a normal day. Work had ended earlier than expected, and he thought it would be a nice surprise to come home before dinner. As he parked his car in the driveway, the house looked quiet, almost too quiet. Usually his 8-year-old son, Liam, would run to the door the moment he heard the car engine. But today there was no sound of footsteps. No cheerful greeting. Mark stepped inside and called out, "Liam, I'm home." No answer came. Instead, he heard a faint sound coming from the kitchen. It sounded like someone quietly crying. Concerned, Mark slowly walked toward the kitchen. As he got closer, he heard his wife Dana's voice. It sounded cold and irritated. "I told you to finish it," she said sharply. Mark stopped at the doorway, confused. When he looked inside, the sight froze him in place. Liam was sitting on the kitchen floor with his head down. In front of him was a small metal bowl, the same bowl their cat usually used for food. Inside the bowl was a mixture of leftover scraps. Liam's hands were shaking slightly. As he picked up small pieces and forced himself to eat, Mark felt his stomach drop. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Stepping into the room, Dana turned, clearly surprised to see him home early. For a moment, she looked irritated rather than embarrassed. "Oh, you're home already," she said casually. Mark ignored her and rushed to Liam's side. The boy's eyes were red from crying, and his face showed a mix of fear and shame. "Liam, stand up," Mark said gently. The boy hesitated, glancing nervously at his mother. "It's okay," Mark reassured him, helping him up from the floor. Mark then turned to Dana, his voice tense with anger. "Why is our son eating from the cat's bowl?" Dana crossed her arms like nothing unusual had happened. "He made a mess earlier and refused to clean it. She said he needs to learn discipline." "Discipline," Mark repeated in disbelief. "This is humiliating," Dana shrugged. "You're overreacting. Kids these days are too spoiled. A little punishment will teach him respect." Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. Liam clung quietly to his father's arm, still trembling. "This isn't punishment," Mark said firmly. "It's wrong." Dana rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. It's just a bowl. He's not hurt." But Mark looked at his son's face and saw something deeper than fear. He saw embarrassment, the kind that could stay with a child for years, without saying another word. Mark took Liam to the sink and helped him wash his hands. Then he placed the bowl in the trash. Dana sighed loudly. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." Mark didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at Liam, who was still quiet and avoiding eye contact. "Go to your room and relax for a while," Mark told him softly. "I'll call you when dinner is ready." Liam nodded and walked away slowly. As soon as the boy was gone, Mark turned back to Dana. His mind was racing with questions and worries. If this was happening today, how many times had it happened before? For the first time, Mark felt a deep, uncomfortable fear growing in his chest. Something inside their home wasn't right, and he wasn't sure how long it had been happening. The next morning, the house felt unusually quiet. Mark barely slept the night before. The image of Liam sitting on the kitchen floor with the cat's bowl kept replaying in his mind again and again every time he thought about it. A mix of guilt and anger filled his chest. At breakfast, Liam sat quietly at the table. Slowly eating his toast, he avoided looking at either of his parents. Dana acted as if nothing unusual had happened. She scrolled through her phone and sipped her coffee calmly. Mark watched his son carefully. "Did you sleep okay?" Mark asked gently. Liam nodded without speaking. "Do you want me to drive you to school today?" Mark continued usually. Liam liked taking the school bus with his friends, but today he quietly said, "Okay." Mark could sense that something inside his son had changed. The cheerful, talkative boy seemed distant and nervous. During the drive, the car remained mostly silent. Mark wanted to ask questions, but he didn't want to pressure Liam. After a few minutes, Liam spoke softly. "Dad, are you mad?" Mark quickly shook his head. "No, buddy. I'm not mad at you." Liam looked out the window. "I tried to clean the mess yesterday." Mark felt a sharp pain in his chest hearing those words. "You didn't deserve that," Mark said firmly. "None of that was your fault." Liam didn't reply, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. When they reached the school, Liam quietly got out of the car and walked toward the building. Inside the classroom, his teacher, Mrs. Carter, immediately noticed something was wrong. Liam was normally energetic and eager to participate, but that day he looked tired and distracted. During the morning lesson, he barely spoke at lunchtime. Mrs. Carter noticed another unusual thing. Liam carefully wrapped half of his sandwich in a napkin and placed it inside his backpack. She walked over and crouched beside him. "Saving some for later?" she asked kindly. Liam hesitated. "Yeah." Just in case of what?" she asked gently. The boy looked around to make sure no one else was listening. "Sometimes I get really hungry at home," he whispered Mrs. Carter felt concerned but kept her voice calm. "Why would you be hungry at home?" Liam hesitated again. His fingers nervously played with the edge of the napkin. "Sometimes I get punished," he said quietly. "What kind of punishment?" she asked softly. Liam looked down at the floor. "Sometimes I have to eat from the cat's bowl." For a moment, Mrs. Carter felt shocked, but she quickly controlled her reaction so she wouldn't scare him. "That must feel very upsetting," she said gently. Liam nodded slowly, Mrs. Carter knew she couldn't ignore what she had just heard. School policy required teachers to report situations where a child might be experiencing harm or neglect later that afternoon. She spoke privately with the school counselor and principal. After carefully discussing the situation, they decided to contact social services so professionals could investigate and ensure Liam's safety. Meanwhile, at home, Mark sat on the couch thinking about the previous night. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he didn't know. Just then there was a knock at the front door. When Mark opened it, two serious-looking people stood outside holding official folders. "Good afternoon," one of them said calmly. "We're from social services. We'd like to talk with you about your son." Mark's heart immediately began to race. Mark's heart pounded as he looked at the two people standing at the door. One was a middle-aged woman with a calm expression, and the other was a younger man holding a folder. "Good afternoon," the woman said politely. "My name is Mrs. Rivera, and this is my colleague. Mr. Thomas, we're from social services. May we come in for a moment?" Mark stepped aside, still surprised. "Yes, of course." They walked into the living room and sat down. Mark could already feel tension building in the house. Dana soon walked in from the kitchen. Her expression confused what's going on. She asked. Miss Rivera spoke calmly. "We received a report from Liam's school regarding a concern about his well-being. We're here to ask a few questions and make sure everything is okay." Dana immediately looked irritated. "A report that's ridiculous." She said someone must have misunderstood something. Mark stayed silent for a moment. "Unsure how to react, we understand this might feel surprising," Mr. Thomas said. "But our goal is simply to make sure Liam is safe and cared for." Dana crossed her arms. "My son is perfectly fine, Mrs. Rivera nodded gently. "We'd still like to speak with him briefly. When he gets home from school, if that's all right." Dana was about to argue, but Mark spoke first. "That's fine," he said quietly. Dana looked at him sharply but didn't say anything. A few hours later, the school bus stopped outside the house. Liam stepped off slowly and walked toward the door. When he entered, he froze. After seeing the two unfamiliar people sitting in the living room, "Hi, Liam," Ms. Rivera said kindly. "Don't worry. You're not in trouble. We just want to talk for a few minutes." Liam looked nervously at his parents. "It's okay," Mark told him gently. Ms. Rivera asked if they could speak privately. With Liam at the dining table, Dana clearly didn't like the idea, but she reluctantly agreed. They sat down together. "How was school today?" Miss Rivera asked in a friendly tone. "Okay," Liam answered quietly after a few simple questions. She gently moved to the important topic your teacher mentioned. "You told her something about a punishment at home," she said softly. "Can you tell us about that?" Liam's fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. For a moment, he looked like he might cry. "It's okay to be honest," Mr. Thomas said reassuringly. "We're here to help." After a long pause, Liam finally spoke. "Sometimes when Mom gets angry, she makes me eat from the cat's bowl." Miss Rivera remained calm, but she carefully wrote notes in her folder. "Has that happened more than once?" she asked gently. Liam nodded. Mark, who was standing across the room, felt a deep wave of guilt and shock hearing those words. "I didn't know it happened before," he said quietly. "Yesterday was the first time I saw it." Dennis suddenly spoke angrily from the couch. "This is getting ridiculous. It was just discipline, Mrs." Rivera turned toward her, still calm but firm. "Humiliating punishment can seriously affect a child's emotional health." She said, "Our responsibility is to make sure Liam is safe." After discussing the situation further, the social workers made a careful decision. "For now," Mr. Thomas said, "Liam will stay temporarily with a close relative while we continue reviewing the situation." Dana protested loudly, but the decision had already been made. Later that evening, Mark drove Liam to his sister's house. As Liam stepped out of the car, Mark knelt down and hugged him tightly. "I promise things will get better. Mark said softly for the first time in days. Liam gave a small, hopeful smile.